when the news sank in this week about the Atlantic journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, who had been accidentally texted highly sensitive military information on a Signal app. Like many of you, I was horrified. I was just like, how could this be happening? I was shocked by the carelessness of communications that should have been highly confidential, communications with human life at stake. And I was also disturbed by the cavalier nature of their communication, replete with emojis, as if they were creating like an amateur bomb in someone's basement. I was equally disturbed, however, by the aftermath. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying, these weren't war plans. And then going on to implicate Jeffrey Goldberg, you're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, he said. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz told Laura Ingraham on Fox News, explaining how he had texted accidentally this journalist, he said, have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name and then you have somebody else's number there? You got somebody else's number on somebody else's contact, so of course, I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now, he continues, whether he did it deliberately, or it happened in some other technical mean, is something we're trying to figure out. No accountability, only shame and blame, projecting all badness outside of themselves, as if they had nothing to do with what happened. President Trump himself described the Atlantic articles regarding the security breach as a witch hunt, and then tries to blame Signal itself, saying, I don't know, that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you, and we're going to have to find that out. The whole thing leaves me worried, and I know I'm not alone, but also leaves me wondering, why is taking responsibility so hard? Here we are at the end of a book of Exodus, in Parshat Pikudei. And this political moment, this denial and refusal of responsibility, brings to mind one of the lowest moments in the book. In Exodus 32, the children of Israel, anxious about their leader Moshe's absence, create a golden calf, and they do it with Aaron's help and leadership. Afterwards, after the whole fiasco, Moshe confronts his brother and says, what did this people do to you? Ki heveta alav chata'a gdola, that you have brought upon it such a great sin. First, Aaron responds by blaming the people, saying, Al yichar af Adoni, don't get mad at me, my Lord. Ataya data et ha'am ki varahu. You know that this people is really bad. But the kicker is his explanation of how the calf came about. He says, V'omar lehem, l'mi zahav, hitparku v'yatnu li, v'ashlichehu va'esh v'yatzei ha'egel hazeh. So I said to them, who has gold? They broke it off and gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Sound like anyone we know? Aaron was decidedly not taking responsibility. I did something this week, and I noticed how I didn't want to take responsibility. It was very small. It wasn't a national security breach or leading my community to worship a golden calf. I double booked, and Sunday night I'll be out of town when I should be at an important meeting for this project I'm part of. Nothing to do with Romamu David. And I thought, okay, so I won't be at a meeting, big deal. And a friend of mine who is going to be at this meeting writes me directly and said, Dianne, this is really not okay. Like, you convene this group and you have, certain expertise, and we all expected you to be there. And when I got that email, I was like, wow, I didn't really want to know how much of an impact I made on others. And I didn't want to own the kind of cavalier way I said, like, oh, so sorry, I can't be there. And I also didn't want to sort of claim any badness, right? It's like, oh, yeah, you're right. What I did really wasn't right. And it was small enough so that I could take responsibility without feeling horrible. And I apologized, and I'm arranging to be part of the meeting on Zoom. But I think this gives us a little window as to why it's hard to take responsibility, right? We don't want to see badness in ourselves. We only want to see badness outside ourselves. And then we demonize others, or we blame others, and we shame others. And that seems to be constantly happening in our government, which is, feels to me like just an ongoing tragedy. So what does this have to do with the book of Shemot? We end this book with the Mishkan, right, with the tabernacle. And I think the Mishkan, the sanctuary that the people build, is such a profound gift for them. Think about these just freed slaves who really can't take in, God's voice at Sinai, right? They begged Moshe, they say to Moshe, like, don't let God speak to us, lest we die. And these just freed slaves who are constantly terrified and can't get over their slave consciousness. And God says to them, here's this Mishkan, you build it, right? So these freed slaves who were building in Egypt for Pharaoh, right, not for themselves, in forced labor, are building something for their own community. And they are finally made a partner, right, in God's sacred enterprise. But if we think about the Mishkan, right, and going to the next book in Vayikra and Leviticus, it also does something else that I think is profound. People are invited to give sacrifices on all kinds of occasions, including wrongdoing, guilt, accidental sins, intentional sins. It's a way to work out what we do bad, right? It's a way to kind of say, I'm acknowledging I hurt somebody, or I'm acknowledging that I wasn't faithful with God in some way. And this way, we're able to kind of let go of our wrongdoings and go back to life. And I fear for our society that there isn't a mechanism like that. Like, if I think about the mechanisms, there's tshuva in Judaism, right? There's owning what you did and acknowledging it and apologizing and making restitution, which is a wonderful, right, wonderful mechanism. But not everyone has this mechanism. There's also therapy, right? It's confessional. Like, you bring your issues and you try to work them out, and you try to let go of your guilt. And hopefully that does also come with some repair of damage. So the Mishkan, I think, is really the gift of the book of Exodus, and it's worth thinking, like, how we let go, how we acknowledge and let go of wrongdoing in our own lives. And I want to suggest that right now, I know so many of us are protesting and writing our congresspeople and our senators and doing what we can to fight what seems to be becoming an authoritarian government. But I want to also suggest that there are smaller things we can do. That while truth is under attack, we can actually acknowledge the truth of who we are, and the truth of what we mean to each other, and the truth of our own vulnerability and inextricability, right? It's hard to be so intertwined, right? One of the reasons it was so hard for me to take responsibility is, look, I didn't want my freedom to be constrained. Oh, so I'm going out of town, big deal, I'm missing this meeting. But it was a big deal. So I want to bless us all with the ability to, in the face of massive and public destruction, to somehow find the healing gestures in our lives, in our everyday lives, that go exactly in the opposite direction, and to honor the truths of who we are and how we live and what we mean to each other.